I'm John Strohmeyer, and this is the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. The market for legal services is shifting, and lawyers who don't adapt will be left behind. This podcast gives you a competitive edge in today's market by sharing the client service lessons you probably didn't learn in law school or in law practice. Let's start the show. Welcome to the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. This week we're talking with John Grant, the Agile Attorney. John focuses his consulting practice on working with lawyers and firms to set up the right practices so that everything else in their practice will just click. I wanted John to come on to explain the three main bottlenecks that practices face. There are problems in every firm, but these are the three main ones that can choke off growth for any practice. Bottleneck number one is going to be getting the work in the door. There are so many different things that we need to do when a client comes in. We want to make sure that we've streamlined it and we know so that we can present a great product to our clients the moment they show up. Bottleneck number two is going to be doing that work. So many things are involved in representing clients. We want to make sure that we can demonstrate not only to the clients that we know what we're doing, but that we also can deliver that quickly and efficiently to our clients. They're hiring us to move the needle for them on a problem, so we want to make sure that we can get that done for them. The third bottleneck is going to be getting paid by our clients. This is the silent problem that can be ignored, but shouldn't be. If we can't get paid for the work we do, the firm's not going to work out. We had a lot of fun with our interview with John, and I'm excited to get to it. Hey, 5-Star listeners. Before we start, I want to tell you about our amazing sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a virtual receptionist service for small businesses with a specialty in working with solo and small law firms. I signed up with them within weeks of starting my firm because they are affordable for even the smallest solo practice. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in Spanish or English, screen and schedule new leads, and can even take payments. And now they're answering calls 24 hours a day. So even when you're asleep, they're still working. Even beyond the phone, they've got live agents and chatbots ready to capture leads on your website, by text, and by Facebook Messenger. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front line so you can work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $70 a month for calls and $100 a month for chats. Smith AI is offering a free trial, and our podcast listeners get an extra $100 discount code with promo code 5-Star. That's FIVESTAR. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. John Grant, we have you here today. We have the one and only Agile Attorney here to talk about some pipelines and some problems.
You know, the good news, I'm cross-talking already,
the
good news,
go for it.
I'm not the only anymore, which is great. Like, there are so many people that have been using these methods and finding some success with them. And it really warms my heart to find folks like Jordan Couch and Aaron Levine and, Billy Trasio and others that are using these Agile methods and finding some success with them.
Well, you've trademarked Agile Attorney, or you should have if you haven't already.
Yes.
You're the only one that people would call the capital A, Agile Attorney.
That's right.
Because you're really the one bringing it, not just using this for yourself. So that's why I had you in. Since you're the one kind of bringing the fire to us, tell us, that's what I want to help our listeners learn about is other ways of thinking about our businesses, and more specifically, some of the problems that we're going to run into as we build a better business.
Yeah. What I'd love to talk about a little bit, and I do this all the time, and it's funny because this isn't directly from capital A Agile, but when I registered my domain name, Lean Lawyer was already taken. But this is more from the world of Lean, and it's a concept called Bottleneck Theory. And it's wound up being really resonant to the law firms and legal teams that I work with. And basically what it says is that in any complex workflow, right, with more than one stage to it, there is only ever a single phase of the workflow that is the bottleneck, that is really constricting the flow of work through your entire system. And there's different ways people imagine it. Some imagine a series of pipes, and one of them is smaller in diameter than the rest. Others like to envision a beautiful river canyon that, obviously has a bottleneck in it somewhere, or a compression point. But either way, the work that flows through your system really does flow through a series of different systems in order to get to that end point, which is presumably delivering valuable work out to your clients. And once you accept that high-level theory as true, that there is, even if there are multiple choke points, there's only one that can be the worst, right? It's sort of like every chain has a weakest link. And yeah, some of them might also be bad, but when you put tension, then one of them's going to break, right? So in bottleneck theory, once you accept this basic idea is true, you get two corollaries that flow from it. The first one is the happy one, which is that if you can improve the flow of work at your system bottleneck, then you will improve the flow of work throughout your entire system, right? So if you can open up that pipeline or open up that canyon wall, then more work is going to flow through more smoothly. But the other corollary, and the one that is a little harder for people to get their heads around, or at least is counterintuitive, is this idea that anything that you do to try to improve parts of your system that aren't the bottleneck won't help. And so if you think about it, again, if it's the pipelines, if you open up and put a bigger pipe in at the front end of your system that is upstream of the bottleneck, all you're going to wind up doing is putting more pressure on that constraint, on that bottleneck. And in fact, you could wind up creating stress and turbulence that will make things even worse. You can also try to work on something that's downstream of the bottleneck, but it's just going to get starved, right? Nothing will ever get to it because everything's getting stuck upstream. So once you sort of accept that bottleneck theory, when it comes to kind of unlocking the potential in a law practice, I tend to think of there as being three high-level systems that you need to worry about. And obviously, each of these has its own subsystems, but at the highest level, there's really only three. There's the getting the work system, there's the doing the work system, and there's the getting paid system. And the success of your business obviously depends on all of those three working. But when things aren't working as optimally as you would like, you need to really try to figure out which one of those is your current bottleneck, and then apply your time and effort and resources in trying to, improve the flow of work at that particular place.
Yeah, I mean, it's from running my own firm and building it up. I've seen, and even just talking to you, it's the getting the work is rarely the problem. Doing the work has been, and the way I've set myself up, getting paid was not the problem because I just insist on retainers up front.
Yeah,
that I was going to get paid. I mean, that may not be a practical option for, I'll just put it out there, of litigators who don't know what they're going to be charging, and they can't ask for potentially hundreds of thousands in a retainer up front to cover everything.
Right. I mean, yes, I tend to think, or I tend to agree with you, that I think fixing the getting paid pipeline is often the easiest thing to do, or at least the suite of possible solutions is the easiest. But mentally, it's the hardest for a lot of lawyers, right? And I learned, I hung my shingle back in 2008, and I paid close attention to Lee Rosen at the time. And Lee Rosen, is kind of the godfather of the evergreen retainer. And, that sure saved my bacon a time or two when I had my own practice. And just that idea that okay, you should always have this reserve of client funds that you can draw from. And that way you just don't get too far over your skis. And it works really well. It worked really well for the kind of practice that I had, right? Which was mostly IP and some business consulting. I think you're right that with some forms of litigation, it can be more complicated, but one of the things about the agile methodologies and lean too, right? And these two, they're very complementary to each other, is this idea that number one, you should be able to decompose your work into sort of component pieces of value. And number two, you should be delivering, the phrase I like to use, as tangible manifestations of value at different steps along the way, right? It's not enough to tell your client, hey, I worked on your case. Right. That doesn't matter to the client. I mean, it might make them feel a little bit good, but so what? You put in effort. I want results.
Right.
Right. I want to see. And so anything that you can do to sort of provide something that they can, sink their teeth into, hang their hat on, whatever, even if it's a virtual thing, right? And it shouldn't be your bill, right? If the only tangible manifestation of value your client gets is your bill at the end of the month, you're probably doing it wrong. I mean, it's better than nothing, right? And if you write good bill descriptions and all the rest, it can be a form of that, but still mostly it's describing your effort, right? You want to give them something that they can really understand and feel like, yeah, you're working for them.
Right. It's something that I picked up from David C. Baker of, as an expert, our job is to move the needle. And if we don't move the needle, we haven't earned our keep. Now,
absolutely.
I think the corollary for litigators, and I'm going to pick on criminal defense attorneys right now. If your client was facing 10 years in jail and they get 10 years in jail, even though you were involved, what have you done for them?
Yeah.
And that is uncharitable on my part. I will admit that now. Say, to all my friends who are going to fire off a letter right now, I'm taking...
And you should.
Yeah, I should. I probably earned it. But the point is, well, among other things, I don't do criminal defense, so I have no idea. I'm just making things up right now.
Well, here, let me defend them for a minute. Not that they can't defend themselves, but one of the things with respect to a manifestation of value in a lot of different legal work, one of the things that's true about our profession is it's complicated, and for a lot of non-lawyers, it is very arcane or esoteric, right? To use lawyer $10 words. And so it's really difficult for a lot of clients to accurately assess whether or not they're getting quality legal work from you, right? I don't know whether you're doing your job well or not, because there aren't good, number one, there aren't good quality standards, right? And number two, there aren't good feedback loops. And so, it's hard to say when you draft a contract or anything else, but by the time you find out that the contract wasn't any good, things have gone horribly wrong, right? And I think even in criminal defense, it can be hard, right? You can put up a good defense and still lose for any number of reasons, some of them valid, some of them not. But in a world where clients don't have good tools for assessing quality, then the quality of their experience with you is the only thing they have to go on. Right. So that gets into customer experience, user experience. And that's the thing, right? And so coming back to that tangible manifestation of value, if you set a cadence, right, in a, let's say it's criminal defense, and every 2 weeks or every month, you send an email, a letter, whatever, that just says, hey, I just want you to know I'm working on your case. Here's where we are. Here's what we've done in the last few weeks. This is what it means for you. If you have any questions or you want to talk anything through, I'm available. Right? Those are the little things that create customer experience and a manifestation of value that ultimately, even if, and I'm not saying anyone's going to be happy to get 10 years, right? But even if the outcome of the matter isn't quite what the client hoped for, it lends to their experience in the system and also, frankly, their feeling of fairness in the system.
Right. And to take the pot shot at myself to hopefully even things up, if I draft a will and somebody says, leave the bad seed out, but the bad seed later comes in, challenges my will after the testator has died, and is able to get whatever they wanted or their share, whatever their fair share is, have I done my job? So, it's not just there. But as you also pointed out, the client's not going to know that at all, because when we're dealing with wills, they've passed. They're gone.
Right.
The family will be there to kind of pick up the pieces and sort out what I may or may not have done as the estate planning attorney. But hopefully having that plan in place and acknowledging it through what we're doing is a way of showing exactly what they're getting and how we can deliver on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I love that you brought up David C. Baker, right? So his sort of seminal book is, I think, is it The Power of Value Pricing or just Value Pricing? Or
are you thinking of Ed Baker? No.
Oh, no. You know what?
Ron
I know
Baker.
what you're thinking of David C. Baker, which is the business of expertise.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. I'm thinking of Ron Baker,
Yes.
which is implementing value pricing.
Also an excellent resource. We will make sure to have links to both the Soul of Enterprise podcast and the Two Bobs podcast.
Yes. Right. All right. Good. We're getting them all out there.
Yes. The back catalog of all the things that have informed both of us.
Yes.
But before we got sidetracked on that, you were talking about Ron Baker and value pricing. So I'm going to put that back to you because you were going somewhere with that.
Well, it's interesting. And it's funny because I've actually, and this is a while ago now, I've had some Twitter exchanges with Ron Baker where he isn't a big believer in lean methodologies. And I actually think it's because he has some misconceptions around them. Although I also think part of it is because I think that his vision or what he understands about lean is really closely tied with Lean Six Sigma. And, I think of them as separate things. And, at risk of alienating some of my friends in the legal ops world, I actually agree that Six Sigma specifically is mostly terrible for lawyers. And not terrible, it's too much for lawyers.
So I'm going to stop you and I'm going to make you define both lean and Six Sigma because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's getting confused.
Sure. Okay. And I, without going too deep down the rabbit hole, lean is a methodology that comes out of the automobile industry, specifically Toyota. Toyota thinks of it as the Toyota production system, right? Because they invented it. But the rest of the world knows it as lean or lean manufacturing. And it's a set of methodologies that comes very much out of sort of the physical world of moving widgets or parts of widgets across a factory floor and assembling them in a way that creates a bigger widget that you can then go sell to your clients. Six Sigma is a related methodology that came out of Motorola, which has to do with high-tech manufacturing. And it's basically a series of quality control standards, which again is very consistent with lean, because ultimately lean manufacturing, like the core takeaway of lean manufacturing is that quality improvement and process improvement are the same thing. And what I mean by that is that if you can improve the way that you define and deliver quality on a consistent basis, then your systems will become more efficient and the flow of work will get better because you will standardize your practices around the delivery of quality. And then also eliminate waste, which is the other lean thing that is basically trying to get rid of or minimize activities that aren't directly related to delivering value to your client.
Okay.
Back to Six Sigma, right? It is about quality definition, but when you're talking about Motorola and like microchip manufacturing, the Sixth Sigma is literally like 5 nines of accuracy. And the thing that I often say is that we don't measure things in microns in the legal industry, right? And so it is possible to get like too involved in some of the dogmatic things that come out of the Six Sigma part of Lean Six Sigma that generates a lot of activity. And, there's things like these big Kaizen events and Gemba walks, all of which, again, they have some value, but they don't necessarily focus on that one bottleneck, right? And so getting back to bottleneck theory, it can be easy to get into a Six Sigma type engagement where it's like, oh my gosh, we have to fix all of the things. And for me, it's like, no. Yes, there are problems with a lot of different things, but let's really spend some time focusing, understanding where that bottleneck is so we can fix the right thing.
Right. It comes back to something I was taught indirectly from the first law firm I worked at. Lawyers love to make the perfect the enemy of the good. And that
absolutely
5 nines probably isn't enough for any law firm. But the reality is, for most of what we're doing, we're arranging words on a page or putting words in an order in front of a judge or a jury. There's a certain amount of flexibility at best in the system that you're just not going to get because you're not running electrons through a strip of copper.
Right. Yeah. Right. Or you're not etching a piece of silicon or whatever. Yeah.
Right. So
I think that's right.
So then if we can't get that 5 nines improvement, how are we supposed to, as lawyers dealing in words, how do we define what that process improvement looks like? What do we do?
Well, words are the tools, right? And even the words are the outputs, or, put it another way and not to get like too esoteric on this. The words are the artifacts. Mm-hmm. Right? It's the evidence of the thing that we've tried to do. But again, really what we're trying to do is help our clients. And there's sort of a framework that I've come to that I've stolen or borrowed from a couple other people in terms of why does the world even have lawyers? And I think that there are a couple of ways of answering that question. And one of them comes from Professor Daniel Katz, who was one of the founders of the legal R&D program at Michigan State. And I think he's still at Chicago Kent Law School today. And he gave a presentation, I don't know, several years ago now, where he said, look, from a practical standpoint, lawyers solve for 2 practical client problems. Number 1, they help clients mitigate risk. Number 2, they help clients navigate complexity, full stop. And from a practical standpoint, I think it's pretty hard to boil it down any more than that. I mean, I think that mostly covers it. Almost everything I can think of will fall into one of those 2 buckets, if not both.
Right.
The other framework, though, and this gets into one of the things I'm big on, is that at the end of the day, legal, being a lawyer, it's a caring profession. It's a people profession. right? We are doing work. Yes, we represent the justice system. Yes, we're trying to, help ensure, right, the rule of law and stability in society. But we're doing that by creating good experiences and good outcomes for our clients. And humans are fundamentally emotional beings. And so there's this emotional component to the same question: why do we have lawyers? And my answer to that actually comes from my former law partner, who, like me, wound up in the world of sort of legal operations, legal marketing, things like that. And he gave a talk a few years ago where he said, look, lawyers emotionally solve for three things. Number one, they satisfy this fundamental human need for seeking wisdom when they're in times of uncertainty. So wisdom seeking is the one. Number two, people want to have advice, right? The wisdom is great, but they also want to know from someone who they trust, what should I do? And I think if you stopped it right there, you would have a really good description of what at least I learned as a 1L in, the introductory lawyering classes in law school. That's the essence of lawyering, right? Is taking someone's specific facts, applying the law to it, and then telling them what they should do, or at least what their options are. But Eric didn't end it there. The last piece, and I think this is critical, is that people also have this need to seek consortium, meaning they want someone who's in it with them. And at the end of the day, right, that is the thing that differentiates lawyers from LegalZoom or lawyers from Rocket Lawyer. And not that there's anything wrong. I mean, I don't have a beef with LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer, although I'm sure some of your listeners will, for different reasons. But at the end of the day, those businesses don't provide consortium, right? And they can't really. I mean, to the extent that you can, feel snuggly with a robot, maybe, but we're not there yet. And I think you even see that, right? I mean, we're a little far from tax time right now, although I guess this year tax time was a lot later than
it's all time.
It's all tax time. But you notice it with TurboTax ads the last couple of years, right? It used to be the TurboTax ads were all about how simple they make it and how fast they make it. And that's true. And that's important. And they do have a differentiating advantage because of that. But the last couple of years, it's also been, and you can talk to someone at the click of a button, and you can call us. And so they've been entering in that consortium piece and trying to add that so that people feel, because that's really the thing that they're missing. And that's the thing that, your tax preparer on the corner or H&R Block or anyone else can deliver that the software program can't.
Right. And LegalZoom is doing the same thing. You can, with your documents, you get either 2 months or 6 months or a year at whatever they're charging. And it's not very much, but extended time with a lawyer to talk through what you want. That comes back to the point of, we're not here to hammer the nails necessarily. I mean, we are good at hammering the nails.
Yes.
But people don't hire us for documents. They hire us to do things, to achieve those results. It's going back to you don't buy a drill because you want a drill. You buy a drill because you want a hole in the wall.
Right.
As I explain it to clients, clients don't want a will or a trust just because they need it. And it's not because they're eager to buy a gallon of legal. It's because they want to know that they're not going to leave a mess at the end of the day. And so they don't care if they get a will or a trust or the singing bush in the desert that tells people what to do. They just want to know that things are going to be taken care of. And my job is to not only expose and resolve the problems they know about, but the ones they haven't thought about. And that's where the value comes in for people. So how do we deliver that value? Again, going back to David C. Baker, that's my value as the expert. It's not in hammering the nail and realizing
exactly.
Oh, I'm here to provide that strategic advice. To finally answer a question I think you had posed to me at Tech Show a year or two ago, and I had to flub around for lines.
No, well, that's all right. No. And it is, it's funny because so one of the things that I'm big on, right, is that this idea that you should have a pretty solid mission idea for a mission statement for a law practice, especially in a smaller firm. Although in any size business, I think it's important. But what I often tell people is a mission statement isn't something you create, it's something you uncover. Right? It's something that you learn about yourself and about your practice and who you care about, and aligning those things and making sure that you get them there. I want to come back to the singing bush because for just a second I thought we were going to go down a Three Amigos rabbit hole, and I was really excited. But I guess we'll leave it for now.
We can. It is one of the grandest movies ever made.
It really is. We'll put that in the show notes too.
Look, I found a recent theory on a YouTube video that everything after the campfire scene is just all three of them having a rabies-induced hallucination before dying.
That sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
I can see that.
Now that we've completely derailed things, we were going to talk about bottlenecks.
Yeah.
And
well, I want to get back to Ronald Baker too, right? In this idea of value pricing, because I think it does get back to what I started to mention about unbundling services. And I think, to the extent that you can sort of better match the money that somebody pays with the feeling of value that you can deliver, then you're going to create better customer experiences, better client experiences, right? So if that's in the estate planning practice, right, there's a certain amount of value that you deliver, frankly, in the initial meeting, because you're taking people that know nothing about the process and you're educating them and you're helping them understand, right, in terms of mitigating risk. The risk that they're mitigating is that their money is not going to go where they want it to. And then you're doing a lot of navigating complexity because it ain't easy.
Right.
And so you're providing these very practical services. And I don't know your process, but I work with a lot of estate planning attorneys, and often after that meeting, they will deliver client homework and say, okay, now you have work to do. But for the clients that I've worked with, we've started including a summary of options and a repeat of some of the things that get said in that initial interview sort of planning meeting. We give it to them again because, number one, it reinforces the information, right? So there's some adult learning theory that comes into it. But number two is it becomes that tangible manifestation of value. Oh, that was a great meeting. Look at all that I learned. Right.
And what I have learned over the last few years of running my own practice, I'm giving clients the homework before they show up. So it's not tell me about your accounts. It's we're going to talk about this stuff. And if you read this before, and I'm explicit, I will say exactly to clients, if you read these 7 pages before our meeting will be between an hour and 2 hours, and it's mostly us talking about what you want to do. If you don't, the meeting's going to be 2.5 to 3 hours, and it's going to feature a lot of me lecturing you and then asking for you to
right.
I'll have either meeting, but I find that and I'll tell clients, I'll have either meeting, but most of my clients prefer the shorter meeting.
Well, and that's, there's a few things that starting to come into play, and not to take it too far afield, but there are access to justice implications in that approach. And, among many hats that I wear, I'm on the board of a nonprofit law firm here in Oregon called the Commons Law Center. And we do both estate planning and a lot of family law. And one of the things that we're doing is moving very aggressively into unbundled legal services, right? Because our clientele can't always afford the full meal deal. We only serve people up to 400% of the federal poverty level, and we do it on a sliding fee. Right. And over 60% of the people we serve actually qualify for legal aid. They just can't get it because the legal aid resources is so constrained. So when we do unbundled work, it's sort of the same thing, right? We actually kick off both of those areas of law with a navigation session, right? A road mapping session where, again, hitting on one of those very specific needs that people have. But we very similarly tell people, and one of the things that we're spending a lot of time on is taking some of that background information and putting it into online videos, putting it into webinars so that we can deliver the 101 class a few different ways. And that way, when they show up to their consultation with an attorney, we can really focus on delivering specific advice and specific counsel and not doing that background stuff. And that gives them more bang for their buck.
And it makes it better for the attorney because having done those initial client, we call them dog and pony shows where you're in there showing off all you know to clients, you get to the point where you've delivered the same information so many times that, all right, well, I'm going to have to explain this concept and it'll take me precisely 2 minutes and 38 seconds to get through this. I'm going to say these 8 sentences or whatever. They will raise their hand at this point. And that's no good for the attorney either. The more you can process that, and it's not that it doesn't need to be given or that information shouldn't be given to the clients. It's you, the attorney, don't always have to be the delivery vehicle in a live setting.
Right. Well, and I'll take you a step further, and this actually gets back to the idea of quality, which is you think you're going to say those 8 sentences the same way every time, but you're human. You're probably not. you might actually miss something every once in a while. And when it's something that you do on such a sort of routine basis, you might not even recognize when you've done it. Right? Because you sort of go into that autopilot. And so one of the advantages of putting that information into, an online training, a webinar, whatever, right? And there's so many different ways you can do it today. And even if it's just a handout, it doesn't matter, but you can really quality check that piece of work, right? And customer experience by having that sort of, whether it's a recording, whether it's an ebook, whether it's a handout, it doesn't matter, but you can spend time and energy, making sure that that is a really high quality product, that you're very consistently delivering the same information. And that way you don't accidentally forget when you're delivering that to your client on a one-by-one basis, right? I mean, humans are human and we miss stuff sometimes.
Right. And as much as we'd like to have a checklist to say, all right, I said this sentence and this sentence and this sentence, that's its own different quality check that you probably don't want to get involved in, so that if you can, get something that's at least reasonably competent the first time.
Right.
And then you come back, and I don't think Kaizen, the 1% improvement over time is much better than 50% every other year.
Right. Well, yeah.
The incremental changes that you make as, somebody asked about this. Great. I'll add in one more sentence here to tweak on that. And the more you see it, the more it gets better.
Right. That's for sure. Yeah. Another concept that's near and dear to my heart, but I'm not sure if we got time to dive all the way into that one too.
No, it's a great one. Again, when the perfect is the enemy of the good, you can't accept lesser substitutes. And really you have to. Otherwise, how many law firms are still, we're going to fax this over. They functionally are the same as they were in 1985, except there's email.
Yeah, I think that's right. Although the silver lining of the pandemic era is that a lot of law firms figured that all out over the last 6 months.
Yes. Well, John, I think this is probably a good place to land the plane. Where can people find you?
So I'm the Agile Attorney. If you Google those words, you will very likely wind up at me. AgileAttorney.com is my web address, or john@agileattorney.com if you want to email me. I'm on Twitter at JEGrant3. I'm on Facebook. There's a Facebook group that is the Agile Attorney Network. And then I've got my own podcast that's in the works right now. I've been telling people I finally got sick of my sourdough starter, so I've entered the ready to start a podcast phase of the pandemic.
Now that Amazon has all the podcasting equipment back in stock.
Yeah, well, I did actually have the equipment beforehand, which was helpful. And I'm doing I've actually recorded a number of these already, but I'm doing a series of episodes to kick it off called Voice of the Client, where I interview people who have either just come out of or somewhat recently been involved in the legal system to find out what do they really think about their experience with their lawyer, with the courts, with whatever proceeding they were in. And I have to tell you, the interviews so far have been really fascinating. There are some things that lawyers will learn a lot from.
Excellent. And so is that going to be the Agile Attorney podcast as well?
That will be the Agile Attorney podcast. You got it.
By the time this comes out, you should probably already, I'll challenge you to put that, have that ready to go.
Yes, good. I like it. Put me on a deadline.
Yes. Here, it's the middle of August, 2020. Go find the Agile Attorney podcast, subscribe, and comment.
Yes. I am shooting to have it up no later than first week of September.
Super. John, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, John. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcounsel.com. You can get in touch with me at john@5starcounsel.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.